Hey, everybody. It is Tuesday, October 7th. You're listening to the Mo News Podcast. I'm Moshe Wanunu. This, of course, is the place where we bring you just the facts and we read all the news and read between the lines so you don't have to. As you can tell, it is just me today. I'm actually coming to you from South Bend, Indiana. We at Mo News are working with Amazon on an exciting new project. We'll bring you details on that later this week, so look out for that. With that said, there is a lot of news to get to on this day, so let's get started here with the headlines. We'll have the latest on President Trump's plans to deploy the National Guard to cities around the country and the legal pushback he is facing regarding his plans to deploy the military within the U.S. and what he says about the 200-year-old law, the Insurrection Act, and whether he might invoke it in order to have his way. We'll have his comments from the Oval Office yesterday. In major media news we've been watching, Bari Weiss was officially named the new editor-in-chief of CBS News. It's a brand new role over there. It's part of the $150 million acquisition of her company, The Free Press. I'll have some thoughts on the impact she might have at the network. As many of you know, I spent about a decade at CBS News. Meanwhile, today marks day 7 of the government shutdown. Is there any hope for a compromise? What Trump alluded to yesterday that might leave room for a potential deal. Another major negotiation we're watching abroad. Talks continue in Egypt between Israel and Hamas today. Where things stand on those talks, as well as overall, as today, October 7th, marks 2 years since the Hamas massacre of Israelis on this day in 2023 that touched off this 2-year war. Along those lines, we'll have a new survey on antisemitism in America. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court has begun its new term this week. They released a decision yesterday regarding the former Epstein girlfriend and associate, Ghislaine Maxwell, and her hope for an appeal. In some business and health news, we'll tell you what drug Costco is now set to sell. And sticking with shopping, we'll tell you what new data says about how much we might be spending this holiday season. Plus, I'll have, as always, on this day in history. But let's start with the latest on President Trump's attempts to deploy National Guard troops in a number of blue cities across the country. On Monday, Illinois filed a lawsuit to block President Trump from deploying hundreds of Texas National Guard troops in Chicago. This is one of the moves the White House has been making after judges have repeatedly blocked the administration from calling up state National Guards against the will of the governors. So the latest move we saw from the White House this weekend was calling up other states' National Guard troops and trying to send them to blue states, in particular using troops from the Texas National Guard in blue states. Now, the White House says this is a necessary move to help deal with confrontations surrounding federal ICE raids, protecting law enforcement officials as well as federal law enforcement facilities in places like Portland and Chicago, where protests at times around these facilities have gotten violent. But the mayors of these cities, the governors of these states are saying the states on the whole, very secure, except for some of these incidents that are specifically located in a sometimes one-block area and are not remotely in need of National Guard troops. Democrats are saying blatantly that this is a power play by President Trump. Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker saying yesterday, quote, "We must now start calling this what it is, the Trump invasion." The mayor of Chicago, Brandon Johnson, signed an order on Monday to prevent ICE from using city-owned land as staging areas. They're not going so far as to call on the Chicago police to arrest ICE officers. That would lead to its own issues. Nonetheless, here, you see a number of officials in these blue states saying there should be no cooperation with the federal government as they continue to escalate things in their cities and states. As I mentioned, Illinois filing a lawsuit here to block the National Guard troops from entering Chicago. A federal judge in Illinois yesterday pressing Trump administration lawyers for more information about their National Guard assignments in Illinois. The judge said she was, quote, very troubled by the lack of answers from the administration and needs more time to review the case. There is a hearing set for this Thursday. Meanwhile, Trump at the White House on Monday defending his decision to send troops in to places like Portland and Chicago.
We're going to make Chicago really great again, and we're going to stop this crime. Then we're going to go to another one, and we're going to go city by city. We're going to have safe cities.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt also asked about this yesterday. She dismissed concerns about Trump's National Guard plans. Reporters asking repeatedly, why should the public not be concerned about this? Are you effectively invading American cities? She pushed back on that, saying, no, this is just about protecting federal law enforcement in these cities. Nonetheless, what concerns a number of folks, including some of these conservative judges, is the precedent set for deploying the military within U.S. cities at a very low bar. Typically, it's major national disasters or massive citywide rioting in recent history that has led to National Guard deployments. Now, remember, we've told you, President Trump has been eyeing Chicago for a while. He's been talking about Chicago for weeks, if not months at this point. But the catalyst here for their call-up of National Guard troops appears to have taken place over the weekend when some protests escalated to a new level. ICE agents used pepper spray, smoke grenades, and rubber bullets on demonstrators. This is at a specific facility in Chicago. And those protests that escalated at the facility came in the aftermath of a military-style raid that took place last Tuesday night in Chicago. That's when, in the middle of the night, agents using helicopters landed on a housing development in the South Shore neighborhood. The operation included nearly 300 federal agents. They used smoke grenades, zip ties. They detained dozens of residents, including U.S. citizens and children. The raid was aimed at targeting members of the Tren de Aragua gang, of which they said several dozen members lived in the building. Nonetheless, the raid, again, was very military style. They broke windows, broke down doors, went door to door, regardless of who lived there, citizens and non-citizens. And as I mentioned, they detained citizens in the middle of the night wearing their pajamas or whatever they went to bed with, held them outside until they could prove their citizenship until the raid was over. For many folks, that was over the line, beyond the line, and is being accused of being unconstitutional. Look out for lawsuits on this raid here in the coming weeks and months. And so that has now led to a new level of outrage in Chicago, leading to these protests. The protesters getting agitated. Then that leads to the violent confrontations outside the ICE facilities. And it included a confrontation over the weekend where a number of individuals apparently are accused of blocking ICE agents. ICE then opening fire, wounding one woman, saying she was threatening them, and they're very concerned about violence against federal ICE officers. But as I lay out what's happening here, you have the White House saying, things are escalating. We got to bring the National Guard. And you have local officials, governors, mayors, Democrats saying, no, things are only escalating because you have escalated it. Nonetheless, this is where we're at this point. So the debate over the National Guard deployment in Chicago continues. That court case continues. Meanwhile, the case we told you about yesterday in Portland, where there were not one but two blocks of an attempt to bring National Guard troops into Portland over the weekend. That case continues to be litigated here. It is a temporary block on the Trump administration. They tried to deploy Oregon National Guard troops initially in Portland. The governor of Oregon said absolutely not. A judge, her name is Karen Immergut, she happens to be a Trump federal appointee. She blocked the move, saying this is unconstitutional. And the Portland that the Trump administration is describing here is just not the reality that I'm seeing. So as we told you, she blocked the Trump administration from taking over the Oregon National Guard. That's when the administration decided to deploy the California National Guard to Portland. The judge then chiming in 24 hours later saying that was not the appropriate response to my ruling. That is also temporarily blocked. In fact, I am blocking you from sending any National Guard troops from any state in the country to Oregon right now. It is unwarranted and a misuse of military power, again, setting a bad precedent here. So that is a temporary restraining order. We're watching all of that. The White House not taking this easy. They believe they will win this on appeal. The White House Deputy Chief of Staff and Homeland Security Advisor, Stephen Miller, you often see him on cable news, said that the administration will comply with the orders here, but they are appealing it, and they believe they have other federal options to send resources to Portland. And one of the things that keeps getting brought up, including in the Oval Office on Monday, is a law called the Insurrection Act. President Trump was asked yesterday afternoon, would he invoke the Insurrection Act? For those of you unfamiliar, the Insurrection Act is a law from 1807 that grants the president emergency powers to deploy troops on U.S. soil. Now, generally speaking, the Insurrection Act gives the president the power to send military forces into the states to quell widespread public unrest or to support civilian law enforcement. Before invoking it, the president must first call on, quote, insurgents to disperse. The last time we saw the Insurrection Act of 1807 invoked was back in 1992. That's when the LA riots broke out after the acquittal of the police officers who beat Rodney King. Some of you might remember this. There was massive rioting across LA, dozens of buildings on fire, and that's where, in coordination with California state officials, the president invoked the Insurrection Act and sent in the military. Before that, we saw the Insurrection Act invoked in natural disaster situations. Anyhow, when Trump was asked about it yesterday, he said, quote, we have an Insurrection Act for a reason. I do it if it were necessary, but so far it has not been necessary if people were being killed and courts were holding us up, or mayors or governors were holding us up, I might do it. So discussing it still in very general terms, in very if terms, but nonetheless, the fact that he didn't close the door to it, the fact that he is noting if courts are holding him up, certainly drawing some concern here. And given what we're seeing here with National Guard deployments, one can imagine if he tries to invoke the Insurrection Act, there will be additional legal cases. Nonetheless, this is a story we're very closely following, and you can monitor the Instagram feed all day for the latest on it, as well as the Mo News web app. For those of you unfamiliar, if you join Mo News Premium over at mo.news/premium, you now have access to all of our coverage in real time, Instagram stories, Instagram posts, via the Mo News web app, but that is only available for Mo News Premium users via the Mo News dashboard, and then you can put it on your home screen on your phone. Again, mo.news/premium to have access to the Mo News web app. All right, now to a big story we've been following in the media business. It is official. Paramount Skydance, the parent company of CBS, named journalist Bari Weiss as the editor-in-chief of CBS News on Monday. It also bought Weiss's news media company, The Free Press. Some of you may be subscribers over there on Substack. They paid $150 million for the 4-year-old media startup. Bari Weiss put out a 9-minute video yesterday morning announcing the news, trying to assure the Free Press subscribers that despite now being owned by Paramount, the outlet will remain independent, will continue to cover things as it has, and she will continue to run the Free Press while also managing CBS News. Take a listen.
The values that we've hammered out here over the years. Journalism based in curiosity and honesty. A culture of healthy disagreement, including in our newsroom. A shared belief in America's promise. Those values now have the opportunity to go very, very big.
Weiss describes herself as a radical centrist. She was formerly an opinion writer and editor over at the Wall Street Journal and then at the New York Times. But in 2020, she resigned from the New York Times after accusations of workplace bullying, intolerance, co-workers of the Times effectively trying to bully her into getting fired, trying to have people on Twitter gang up against her. Nonetheless, she resigned and said, "I've had enough of this. I will not just have to kowtow to progressive opinions. I'm going to do my own thing." Again, describes herself as a radical centrist. She would then quickly go on to found her company, The Free Press, known for publishing contrarian opinions and news coverage that you often don't see in the mainstream media. Really, it's a remarkable journey from her time at the New York Times, where you can imagine she was probably getting paid as an opinion editor a couple $100,000 a year, launching a brand, and then within 4 years selling that brand for $150 million. Paramount celebrated Weiss's hiring yesterday as a way to make CBS more balanced and fact-based. CBS News has been accused for years of having a liberal bias, and as somebody who worked within that organization for 10 years, I certainly experienced that at times. There was a lack of viewpoint diversity or political diversity within the organization. That's something Paramount has vowed to correct, especially in light of the fact they needed approval from the Trump administration for their merger with Skydance in order to buy CBS in recent months. And among the commitments they made was to make CBS more fair. Now, of course, that is leading to skepticism from folks on the left saying, well, aren't you just essentially creating a conservative outlet there? We shall see what happens, though my response has been there's a lot of room in the middle before going to a right-wing outlet from where CBS is now and where CBS could be. Now, Weiss will be working with a number of the network's most popular and influential shows. As someone who worked there, the shows have been very independent for a very long time. The shows decide what they want to cover on their own. So it'll be a very interesting challenge to watch how she tries to manage the coverage of the network there. I spent years helping launch the morning show, launching and running the digital properties there, including the streaming channel, as well as running the CBS Evening News. And this is going to be one of the more interesting stories we're watching in the media world in the coming months and years. CBS, remember, is an American institution. It goes back to the radio days, the Columbia Broadcasting System, the days of Edward R. Murrow and Walter Cronkite and 60 Minutes, dominating the airwaves on Sunday night, getting upwards of 60 or 70 million people watching back in the day. But over the course of the past 3 decades, it fell into third place. And among the challenges she now faces as the editor-in-chief of CBS News is really multifaceted. She's got to fix the business and get in line for the digital world of 2025. She's got to fix the ratings for the live television element of it, in addition to the digital infrastructure. And then there's a challenge of making it relevant again, making CBS News and the stories that it does part of the conversation again, stories that pop, stories we're talking about, stories that have an impact. So there's the business, there's the relevance, and then there's the bias angle. As I mentioned, there's very little viewpoint and political diversity within CBS News. The place for years has been very liberal, and there have been a number of stories in recent years where the bias has been apparent. Now, that will also be a major challenge for her and something she will likely work on, in addition to the business and the idea of working on stories that, really kind of pop and are unique and make the place relevant to the larger political conversation again. All right, now time for today's speed read. We start with this from Politico. It is day 7 of the government shutdown. No end in sight. The U.S. House is out until next week. It means it's up to the Senate here to pass the funding bill. Remember, the House, controlled by Republicans, they've passed a bill that effectively funds the government but makes no concessions to Democrats. But in the Senate, where they need 7 Democrats in order to pass legislation, that's where there's been a standstill. Yesterday, they voted again on various temporary funding bills. None of them passed because there really has been no compromise here in the past week. Democrats are saying, you need to compromise with us before we vote to reopen the government. Among the demands that Democrats have made is that Republicans roll back some of the cuts they made to Medicaid earlier this year that impact millions of Americans. And Democrats are looking for a commitment right now that federal subsidies for the Affordable Care Act, for Obamacare, will not expire for millions of Americans at the end of this year. Republicans have said, yeah, we'll discuss it once the government is open again. But Democrats say, you've done this to us before, you've made those promises before, and right now, we can't trust you on that. So ultimately, we will not vote to reopen the government unless you make a deal with us. Besides a meeting last week at the White House that really went nowhere, there hasn't been much in the way of open negotiations, though there have been some behind-the-scenes talks between some Republicans and some Democrats. You do see signs here that Republicans are going to be willing to compromise, especially on an issue like healthcare insurance subsidies, which more than 7 out of 10 Americans agree should be in effect, because the thing is, most Americans do not want to pay more for health insurance. So Democrats believe they have the advantage here. And it was notable because yesterday in the Oval Office, Donald Trump was asked about this, and he signaled some openness to working with Democrats. Take a listen.
Would you make a deal with them on the ACA subsidies?
If we made the right deal, I'd make a deal. And we're talking to them. I mean, I'm not saying that's going to happen, because this has also been going on, not for 3,000 years, but it's been going on for a long time. But yeah, we're talking to the Democrats.
You would work to make a deal with them on...
I'd like to see a deal made for great health care. Yeah, I want to see great health. I'm a Republican, but I want to see health care much more so than the Democrats.
Effectively, what Trump is saying is he's open to negotiations here on some sort of deal when it comes to health care subsidies. The reaction was very quick from Democratic leader Chuck Schumer, who's like, yeah, let's chat. We're ready to make a deal too. So we're going to see how this unfolds here over the coming days. Again, we're 1 week into this shutdown. The longest shutdown in history happened the last time Trump was president, back in 2018, 2019. That lasted 35 days. We'll see how long this goes. In talking to some Republicans on Capitol Hill, there is a feeling like it won't be solved this week, but they're hoping by early next week. So this shutdown could go about 2 weeks or so. There are some key deadlines to watch here, though, including this Friday. The first paycheck will go out that will not be the full amount to government workers, because it'll include a few days of the shutdown. The following paycheck later this month, that'll have no pay for anybody. And remember, non-essential workers, several 100,000 of them are currently furloughed from the federal government, but you still have essential workers coming in with no pay right now. And that includes a number of people who work at the airports, air traffic controllers and TSA agents. And Transportation Department officials said yesterday, they are already seeing a slight tick up in the number of air traffic controllers calling in sick. That comes as we already have a shortage in this country of air traffic controllers. It's already a very stressful job. Now add to that they aren't currently being paid, though there is an expectation once the shutdown ends that they would get back pay. But already we're seeing the impact here. If you were trying to fly in or out of Burbank Airport yesterday in California, well, there was literally no one in the air traffic control tower in the afternoon and evening hours. Nobody at Burbank Airport. They ended up handling flights out of a regional facility, but not at the airport where the air traffic control tower was empty. It led to major delays. They were basically managing Burbank Airport how they handle very small airports across the country, where a regional facility handles it, but you typically don't handle an airport of its size in that way. So there are major safety concerns as well as convenience concerns for Americans who will not be happy about increasing delays at the airport. And remember, that is what led to the end of the last shutdown, when air traffic controllers and TSA agents had it, stopped coming to work in January of 2019. leading Washington to make a quick compromise on that shutdown. So something we will watch here. All right, our next story from Reuters. Delegations from Israel and Hamas began indirect negotiations in Egypt yesterday that the U.S. hopes will finally bring a halt to the war in Gaza. Israel and Hamas have both endorsed the overall principles of President Trump's 20-point peace plan, though Hamas came at it with a lot of caveats. And the concern here is, what can they agree on before they get to the more challenging subjects? So the first part they're negotiating right now is a hostage release. The idea right now is a full hostage release, not a partial hostage release, of the 48 remaining hostages in Gaza. 20 of the 48 are still believed to be alive, and then there are the remains of the other 28. The idea is some sort of exchange there, that Hamas would release the remaining hostages, and Israel in exchange would release about 250 Palestinian prisoners, most of whom have life sentences for committing various crimes and murders in Israel, along with 1,700 other Palestinians who have been detained since the October 7th attack. Israel, in exchange, would also pull back its troops from areas of Gaza, though there is a discussion happening and pushback from Hamas about how much and how quickly they want the Israelis to pull out. Then there is the question of Hamas's role in a post-war Gaza. The terrorist organization wants a guarantee of safe passage for senior Hamas figures who are leaving Gaza. They also want to say in the future of Palestine. That's something that the Americans, the Israelis, and most Arab countries have said, we are done with you guys. And that's essentially what you see in the Trump 20-point plan. And so we'll see how these negotiations go here in the coming days. Notably, the Hamas delegation, led by a guy named Khalil al-Hayya, he was one of the Hamas leaders that Israel tried to kill last month in Qatar. If you remember that strike in Qatar, he survived, though al-Hayya's son was killed in the strike. He is leading the negotiations for Hamas. Meanwhile, for the Israelis, a minister named Ron Dermer, who's very close to Benjamin Netanyahu. And on the American side, Steve Witkoff, the Trump special envoy, and Trump's son-in-law, Jared Kushner, are both expected to be in Egypt in the next few hours to help with the negotiations. Jared Kushner served a key role in Trump's first term. Among the things that he did in the first term was also help establish the Abraham Accords, a peace deal between Israel and a number of Arab countries. And since then, Jared Kushner has developed several $1 billion in business in the Arab world. So he has a number of ties there that Trump hopes are useful and productive for a deal here. And we should mention on this October 7th that today marks 2 years since the Hamas attacks, where they killed about 1,200 people in Israel, took more than 250 hostages. That, of course, touched off the massive military retaliation by the Israeli government and the 2-year war here that we've seen unfold in the region. And officials from many countries, including the U.S., are looking to bring to an end very quickly. As we mentioned on the podcast, the Nobel Peace Prize is being announced this Friday, and that's something that's been very high on Trump's agenda here as he's been working on various global conflicts, including this one. Along those lines, the families of Israeli hostages wrote a letter to the Nobel Committee yesterday saying they should give the award to President Trump, writing, "In this past year, no leader or organization has contributed more to peace around the world than President Trump. He has not merely spoken of peace, he has delivered it." They wrote in the letter, remember, a number of officials around the world have nominated Trump for the Nobel Prize, including the Pakistani Prime Minister, as well as the Israeli Prime Minister. And in a sign of the times, there's a new survey of American Jews on anti-Semitism in America 2 years since October 7th. More than half of American Jews say they have faced anti-Semitism in the past year. Most now see it as a routine part of Jewish life. The findings were released Monday by the Anti-Defamation League and the Jewish Federations of North America, highlighting how anti-Semitism, once seen as fringe, has entered the mainstream discourse, influencing politics, campuses, and public life. 57% of Jews now believe that anti-Semitism is part of a normal Jewish experience in America. In many cases, people are attacking Jews or engaging in anti-Semitism as they see Jews anywhere as guilty for the conduct of Israel, or even beyond that, just various conspiracy theories about Israel and Jewish control of the world, things that you don't see other minority groups or religious groups deal with. Anti-Jewish crimes account for the vast majority of religious crimes in the U.S., despite the fact that Jews make up about 1% of the population. Nearly 1 in 5 Jews say they have either been physically assaulted, physically threatened, or verbally harassed because of their Jewish identity in the last year. And one stat that caught our attention, 1 out of 3 Jews say they're developing worst-case scenario plans in case anti-Semitism gets worse in America. And 14%, 1 out of 6 Jews, say they've already put together plans to flee the country if necessary. A reminder, there are about 6 million Jews in America. All right, from the Mo News Instagram page, the Supreme Court yesterday denied hearing an appeal from Ghislaine Maxwell. She's the longtime associate and former girlfriend of Jeffrey Epstein. She was attempting to overturn her criminal conviction for sex trafficking. Maxwell filed her appeal with the Supreme Court back in April, with her legal team arguing that she was unlawfully prosecuted due to a non-prosecution agreement that Epstein had secured for himself back in 2007. Maxwell was not named in that agreement, and so the Supreme Court rejected the appeal here. A reminder that the U.S. Supreme Court sees about 8,000 appeals and applications to take up cases every single year, but the court really only takes up about 80 cases, so you have about a 1 in 100 chance of getting your case heard by the Supreme Court. So Maxwell rejected here. A reminder that she was found guilty on 3 counts in federal court in New York and sentenced to 20 years in prison back in 2022. So she is not set to get out until the 2040s, except she has one last literal get out of jail free card, and that belongs to President Trump. Now that the Supreme Court has rejected her appeal, she would be dependent on a pardon or a commutation from President Trump. Remember, she was in the spotlight all summer long as the Epstein files became a central focus here. And as various accusations came out, the Justice Department interviewed her. She had a conversation with a top Justice Department official who also happens to be a former Trump defense attorney. In that interview, the transcript was released. She said that she never saw President Trump do anything wrong. And then about a week later, though they haven't said this was officially connected, but she was transferred from prison to a minimum security federal prison camp, leading to accusations they were rewarding her for testifying that Trump did nothing wrong with Epstein. There has been no comment on that since the transfer this summer, but I will add here that Trump was asked about Ghislaine Maxwell in the Oval Office yesterday and whether he would consider pardoning her in the future. Trump did not rule it out, saying in the Oval Office yesterday that he was not opposed to it and he would look into it. Now, when CNN reporter Caitlin Collins reminded him that she was sent to prison for sex trafficking, he still said, yeah, I'll look into it. You know, people apply for pardons all the time. And then he mentioned that Diddy, who was just recently convicted several years in prison, has also asked him for a pardon. And Trump has not ruled that out either. From NBC News, Costco members will soon be able to buy GLP-1 medications like Ozempic and Wegovy at a major discount thanks to a new partnership with manufacturer Novo Nordisk. The injectable pens will be available at Costco pharmacies for a flat, out-of-pocket cost of $499 for a 4-week supply. For members with insurance, prices will vary depending on their plan. Novo Nordisk already offers the same $499 deal through its website, as well as through CVS and Walmart. The medications are used for weight loss and type 2 diabetes, but recent studies have also shown that they help reduce stroke risk, treat liver disease, and improve heart health. Demand for weekly injections has soared. As of last year, 1 in 8 U.S. adults has taken a GLP-1 medication. It's expected at the end of this year that number will go up significantly, but affordability remains a challenge. About 1 in 5 people with private insurance lack coverage for at least one brand name GLP-1 drug. And just over a year ago, the CEO of Novo Nordisk was grilled on Capitol Hill over the high prices of Ozempic and Wegovy, at the time costing $1,300 per month. They've been accused of ripping off Americans, noting that it's much cheaper to get them in European countries. So we'll be watching here to see if Novo Nordisk also comes up with a deal, sort of like what we saw with Pfizer and the Trump administration last week. All right, from CNBC, online holiday shopping in the U.S. is expected to jump 5% year over year to more than $250 billion this year. That's according to an Adobe Analytics report released Monday. Now, the growth and how much we're spending still expected to be lower than we saw last year. Adobe data tracks more than 1 trillion visits to U.S. retail websites, 100 million unique items in 18 different product categories. But it still does not track all of the dollars spent online, so it still remains to be seen if you're a retailer or you sell things along the holiday season, whether you will see a boost, flatline, or a slight decrease from last year. According to another survey from PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC, consumers telling that survey they plan to spend about 5% less this year, an average about $1,552 for holiday gifts, travel, and entertainment. When they broke it out by generation, Gen Z said they would be spending the lowest amount of all the generations, planning to spend about 23% less than they spent just a year ago. All right, now time for On This Day in History. On this day in 1916, the most lopsided football game in college football history. On October 7th, 1916, Georgia Tech defeats Cumberland University 222-0. Again, the most lopsided game in college football history. The coach for Georgia Tech at the time, John Heisman, later the namesake of college football's most famous trophy, the Heisman Trophy. They apparently had a lead at halftime of 126-0. Heisman urged his team to keep the pressure on. He said, "You'll never know what those other players have up their sleeve. Go hard in the second half." And it appears they did, scoring another 96 points. On this day in 2001, the U.S.-led coalition begins attacks on the Taliban-controlled Afghanistan. This is just a couple of weeks after 9/11, an intense bombing campaign by U.S. and U.K. forces trying to take out al-Qaeda camps and then take out the Taliban, which was protecting al-Qaeda at the time. The invasion of Afghanistan was really the opening salvo of the U.S. war on terror that continues to this day. The conflict in Afghanistan would span 2 decades, be the longest war in U.S. history, costing trillions of dollars. We would lose thousands of U.S. soldiers and contractors until that withdrawal from Afghanistan in the summer of 2021. On this day in 1982, Cats opens on Broadway. The Andrew Lloyd Webber musical would eventually have 7,485 performances before closing in September of 2000. On this day in 1996, Fox News Channel launches for the first time, beginning to broadcast October 7th, 1996. Fox News Channel, created by Rupert Murdoch's News Corp as an alternative to CNN. And I should mention, 1996 turned out to be a key year for cable news because earlier that summer, in August of 96, MSNBC launches for the first time. Later this year, they will be taking on a new name, MS Now. And one more thing to mark on this day, happy birthday to Spotify. Turning 17 years old today, Spotify launched on this day in 2008. For those of you tracking the most downloaded song of the year, I just checked it out. It looks like right now, with more than 1 billion streams for the year, Rosie and Bruno Mars with Uppita. I think I'm pronouncing that right. Uppita. I wish Jill was here to sing it along with me, is the #1 song for the year. We will see if Taylor Swift's new album, if any of the songs from her new album that launched last week, will give Uppita a run for its money. Checking as of Monday night, Fate of Ophelia from the new Taylor album has just about 70 million streams in just 3 days. All right, I want to thank you for listening to the Mo News Podcast. Appreciate all of you for spreading the word, telling your friends, family, Uber drivers, baristas, anyone in your life about the Mo News Podcast, and I will see you back here tomorrow.
Thank you, listen to Mo News Podcast.